Which incumbent governors improved upon their margins in 2022 and which did worse? Today on Political Access, we're going to go through all the incumbent governors for all the states, and we're going to see how their margins compare to their previous win in 2018. So let's jump right into this. I've got a spreadsheet that I made, and I already did this for the U.S. senators, so take a look at that if you'd like. And this is only for incumbent governors who are running for re-election. So the first column here are the states that had incumbent governors in 2022. The next column is the governor. The next column is their winning percentage in 2018. The next column is what the runner-up had in 2018. Usually that's another Democrat or Republican. Occasionally there's an independent candidate there. And I also should say that I did include New Hampshire and Vermont. They have elections every 2 years, but they were still incumbents, so I included them anyway. The next column is the winning percentage in 2022. The next column is the second place percentage in 2022. The next column is the margin they had in 2018. And the next column is their margin in the recent midterms. And the final column, which is the most important column, that is the difference between the first margin and the second margin, so we can see which ones improved and which ones regressed. And then I also have the shading here. The dark green is over a 10-point improvement. The dark red is over a 10-point loss, and that goes all the way down to the light red and green, which are under a 5-point net change. And only one incumbent governor lost re-election in 2018. We'll get to that, but I'm sure you already know who that is. But let's get started here in Alabama. And Kay Ivey ran for re-election. In 2018, she got 59.5% of the vote. Second place there got 40.4%. This time, she bumped it all the way up to 66.9%. The runner-up there got 29.2%. Her 2018 margin was 19.1%. This time her margin was 37.7%. She almost doubled her margin and improved it by a whopping 18.6%. That's a big improvement for Kay Ivey. The next state is Alaska. Mike Dunleavy, the Republican, he won with 51.4% of the vote. Second place was 44.4%. Since then, they changed to ranked choice voting, so that does skew things a little bit. He did win in the first round. He got over 50% of the vote. It's 50.3%. And the next runner-up there got 24.2%, even though there was more than two candidates left. But his 2018 margin was 7%. This time, that goes all the way up to 26.1%. It's a little bit misleading, but that's all the data I have, and that's a 19.1% improvement for Mike Dunleavy. Next, in California, incumbent Democrat Gavin Newsom, he got 61.9% in 2018. He also had that recall, which was actually about the same margin. But this time, in 2022, he got 59.2%. Runner-up there got 40.8%. First margin was 23.8%. This time, it ticked down a little bit to 18.4%. That's a 5.4% loss for Gavin Newsom. Next in Colorado, Jared Polis, incumbent Democrat, he got 53.4% in 2018. 2022, he got up to 58.5%. 2018 margin was 10.6%. 2022 margin 19.3%. That's an 8.7% improvement for Polis. Next state is Connecticut. Incumbent Democrat Ned Lamont, 2018 got 49.4%. This time he went up to 56%. 2018 margin was 3.2%. 2022 it was up to 13%. That's a 9.8% improvement for Ned Lamont. Next state is Florida. Ron DeSantis, incumbent Republican, 2018 he got 49.6%. This time he's up to 59.4%. His first margin was a narrow 0.4%. This time it's up at 19.4%. That's a huge 19% improvement on the margin of victory for Ron DeSantis. Next, in Georgia, Brian Kemp, in 2018, he got 50.2% of the vote. 2022, he got 53.4%. The previous margin was 1.4%. 2022, it's up to 7.5%. That's a 6.1% improvement for Brian Kemp. Next, in Idaho, Brad Little, he got 59.8% in 2018. In 2022, it went up a little to 60.5%. His previous margin was 21.6%. 2022, it went all the way up to 40.2%. That is a net increase of 18.6% for Brad Little. A lot of that reason is independent candidate Ammon Bundy. He got 17% of the vote in third place there. The second place Democrat got 20%. So that explains why there was a substantial increase in that gap. Next in Illinois, J.B. Pritzker. 2018, he got 54.5% of the vote. 2022, it was up slightly to 54.9%. His previous margin was 15.7%. 2022, it went down to 12.5%. That's a net 3.2% loss for Pritzker. Next in Iowa, Kim Reynolds. 2018 got 50.3% of the vote. 2022, it went up to 58.1%. That previous margin was 2.8, and in 2022, it's 18.6. That is a major increase for Kim Reynolds of 15.8%. Next in Kansas, Laura Kelly got 48% of the vote in 2018. 2022, it ticked up to 49.5. That previous margin was 5%. 2022, the margin was 2.2. That's a 2.8% loss for Laura Kelly. Next in Maine, Janet Mills got 50.9% in 2018. In 2022, it went up to 55.7. The previous margin was 7.7. 2022, it went up to 13.3. That's a 5.6% improvement for Janet Mills. Next state is Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer, 2018, got 53.3% of the vote. 2022, she was up to 54.5. Previous margin 9.5. 2022 margin 10.6. It's a mild 1.1% improvement for Whitmer. Next in Minnesota, Tim Walz, 2018, got 53.8% of the vote. 2022 down to 52.3. The previous margin was 11.4. And in 2022, it's down to 7.7. That's a 3.7% loss for Tim Walz. Next in Nevada, Steve Sisolak, 2018, got 49.3% of the vote. In 2022, he lost re-election by 1.5%. That is a net loss of 5.5% for Steve Sisolak. He was the only incumbent to take a loss in 2022. Next in New Hampshire, Chris Sununu, he got 65.1% of the vote, but that was actually in 2020. That's why it is underlined. In 2022, he got 57% of the vote, and his previous margin was 31.7. 2022, it's down to 15.5. That's a steep 16.2% loss of support. Next in New Mexico, Michelle Luann Grisham, she got 57.2% in 2018. 2022, down to 52%. Previous margin, 14.4%. 2022, down to 6.4. That's an 8% loss of support in New Mexico. Next in Ohio, Mike DeWine, he got 50.4% in 2018. 2022, he went all the way up to 62.4. The previous margin was 3.7, and 2022, it's an even 25%. That's a 21.3% improvement for Mike DeWine. That is quite significant. Next state, Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt got 54.3% in 2018. 2022, 55.4. Previous margin was 12.1. 2022, 13.6. That's a mild 1.5% improvement. South Carolina, Henry McMaster got 54% in 2018. 2022, he got 58.1. That previous margin was 8.1. 2022, 17.4. That's a 9.3% improvement for McMaster. Next in South Dakota, Kristi Noem. She won with 51% of the vote in 2018. In 2022, it went all the way up to 62%. Previous margin was 3.4. 2022 shot all the way up to 26.8%. That is a major 23.4% improvement for Noem. Next in Tennessee, Bill Lee, he got 59.6 in 2018. In 2022, he got 64.9. The previous margin was 21. 2022 went up to 32%. That's an 11% improvement. Next in Texas, Greg Abbott, he got 55.8 in 2018. In 2022, it went down slightly to 54.8. The previous margin was 13.3. 2022, it's down to 10.9. That's a 2.4% loss for Greg Abbott. Next in Vermont, Phil Scott. His previous win was in 2020, and he got 68.5% of the vote. It's hard to improve on that number, but he took it up to 69.2% in 2022. That previous margin was a huge 41.1%, and it went all the way up even higher to 45.8%. That's a 4.7% improvement for Phil Scott. Next in Wisconsin, Tony Evers, he got 49.5% in 2018. In 2022, it went up to 51.2. 2018 margin 1.1%. 2022 margin at 3.4%. That's a 2.3% improvement. And finally, the last state is Wyoming. Mark Gordon, he got 67.1 in 2018. In 2022, it went up to 74.1%. That's even better than Phil Scott did. The previous margin was 39.6. And in 2022, it was up to 58.3%. And that is an 18.7% improvement for Mark Gordon. Those are some legendary numbers in Wyoming. So that's all the data. And we can take all of it and apply it to a map to help visualize it. And here it is. The shading is similar. Over a 10-point margin are the darkest colors. All the way down to the lightest colors, those would be under a 5-point shift. And there were no changes that were under a 1-point shift. So only one incumbent loss. And are there any takeaways from this? I don't think there's much. There's a bunch of governors that shot way up. There's really only one that went way down. That was in New Hampshire. And I think a lot of these margins, Even though they changed, I don't think they're very meaningful. Usually we think of incumbents as being stronger, so that's why I wanted to take a look at this kind of data. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this data? Any states that you are surprised by, let me know down below. And on your way out, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.